Thank you, everybody, for coming. This is a rolling series of experiments with webinars and getting more expertise out to the world about some great campaigns people are running and also that we can feed into. Orshi is currently she's going to be broadcasting from her phone because in the office they don't have webcams. So I appreciate the extra effort she's made to be here and make this possible. And we're going to have some questions later. Those questions, if you have a microphone attached to your computer, you'll be able to ask those to her directly. So I haven't experimented with this before, but I talked to support a lot and they told me how it should work. So we'll see if it does work that way. Otherwise, I'll take questions in the chat and just repeat them. But we'll try to have you, if you have a microphone, to be able to ask questions as well. So I'm now going to try and switch to Orshi's video. A situation in Hungary around migration, and also about the campaign that they're running. So, oh, sorry, supposed to say, this is a reminder for me to say, Orshi is going to be an opening speaker at ECampaigning Forum Europe in Berlin on the October 5th to 7th. So would love to see some of you there. And of course, this is an attempt to also get some of that expertise shared to the wider world as well. So, good. So, Orshi, you take it away. And I can't see you yet, but I will.
I think I'm here with my voice.
You are there with your voice.
Hi, everyone, meanwhile.
I'm about to turn your video on, I think.
Yeah. Hi.
There we go. Okay.
Okay, so we are there. Hi, everybody. This is Orsi Jeney, the director of Amnesty International Hungary. I'm sitting in our office's kitchen, which gives you a good insight to see how a civil organization in Hungary works. And I'm very happy that so many of you join, and I hope you will find this webinar interesting. And so I should go ahead with the...
Yes, so I think the first place to start is tell us a bit about the background in Hungary, about, in terms of migration and the government's response that you're having to act in. I think that's critical.
So I'm sure many of you are familiar with the hostile attitude Hungary is behaving towards refugees, those fleeing wars and persecution here in Hungary. And basically this has led to a situation where Hungary is more or less a refugee-free zone. I think before we go into details of the campaign, it's interesting to a little bit summarize how we ended up here. Hungary has always been a transit country for refugees, and even in 2013, when we had the highest number of asylum seekers applying for refugee status, the number was about 2,000 a year, which has started to increase up to 47,000 in 2014. And in 2015, eventually, we finished the year with some 386,000. So clearly, it was a huge overload for the country, but nobody was expecting Hungary to deal with the situation on their own. But for some reason, and if you are mostly campaigners, you are probably well aware of all the reasons that it can be behind, which is usually connected with politics and political interest. The current government of Hungary, by the way, a Christian Democrat government, has started basically, as now we can see, a great wave of creating scapegoats of refugees, constantly calling them illegal immigrants. I'm sure it's familiar to many of you. And since last January, we've seen a systemic, basically anti-refugee campaign that is pretty well built up. It started with following the Charlie Hebdo massacre, when basically our prime minister came back, and this was the first time he started to talk about the connection between terrorism and migration. Then the Hungarian government has launched a national consultation regarding terrorism and migration. This national consultation meant that every single person who has a voting right in Hungary has received an envelope which already on it said, a national consultation on terrorism and migration. So already connecting these two words was started to be put in the general atmosphere. Then the famous campaign, the billboard campaign started. You might have heard about them because I think unfortunately they were pretty effective, and I know that Duan has included in probably you can see it now in the background. There was a series of 3 big billboard posters. As you can see, they are all blue with a specific font with the logo of the government. And there were 3 sentences. One said, if you come to Hungary, you have to respect our culture. If you come to Hungary, you cannot take away the jobs of the Hungarians. And actually, I can't now remember the third one. And these posters were just everywhere in the country and basically in Hungarian. So clearly, it wasn't aimed at any foreigner coming to us. And clearly, there was no legitimate requests towards these foreigners, but it was mostly a messaging from the government. And then in June, the Hungarian government, while they were processing the results of the national consultation on migration and terrorism, they announced that they are going to build a fence on the southern border. It was very hard to believe that time, but in effect, they did start building it. So eventually they built a 175-kilometer long fence along the southern border. And they still did not stop with the anti-refugee campaign. The results of the national consultation came out. Surprisingly, people said that they were afraid of terrorism. Surprisingly, when there was a question, for example, that was asking them, do you prefer that the Hungarian government supports your family or an illegal migrant instead? You can imagine what the answer of people were. It was a very misleading and a very biased questionnaire. So when the results came out, there was a second wave of big posters. Again, the same photo, the same font, the same color everywhere. It said, people have decided we have to protect our borders. And then the rhetoric started again, how basically all these people, all these illegal immigrants are posing a threat to us. And they were totally dehumanizing those people fleeing wars and persecution. And they were portraying them as illegal immigrants who only come here because they, instead of staying home, they just want a better life. And then the fence was built in September. On the 15th of September, the southern border was closed. And meanwhile, Hungary has also enacted several legislative amendments, which really basically restricted the access to asylum. And with some current, again, legislative amendments, now basically you can't really have a situation where you actually apply for asylum. But throughout the borders and 8 kilometers away from the borders, you can submit your wish that one day you want to submit an application, but then the government, the authorities will say that you are not allowed to apply because you have come through safe third countries, which is Serbia in this case as well. And then now it's the last wave of big billboards. The big billboards are, I think, so far one of the nastiest, and it really, really upsets those few people who still think that refugees are human beings and that they deserve humanity. The last poster is basically the same blue color, the same font type. It says, have you known that the Paris terror attacks have been committed by immigrants? And very similar. And how did you know that since 1.5 million illegal immigrants came to Europe, 300 people have died due to terror attacks? It's a very nasty one. It's a running up campaign to the national referendum that is going to be held on the 2nd of October. And this is my final stage. I mean, unfortunately, there's too much to tell about this because it's very sad. But now the Hungarian government has initiated a referendum on the European relocation quota. Hungary should be receiving 1,294 refugee claims. And instead, they have initiated a referendum where they want people to say that Brussels is not in any position to tell us what to do. And so that's why you have the accompanying posters. The reason why we felt it's important to say all this background, which has nothing to do with the campaigning, but it really shows the very, very hard circumstances we are working with. Somebody said once, we are trying to campaign with little badges against the huge billboards. And in addition to this, Amnesty, although Amnesty is an independent global organization, we are not appearing on national media. And so we also don't have a real chance to provide our counter argument. So this is more or less for the background. I'm giving the word back now to Joanne, and then we'll see how to proceed.
Great, thanks, Orshi. And it's shocking, some of those stories of what the government's doing and how people are being treated. So I guess the first question is, what are your biggest challenges in trying to counter this anti-migrant opinion, both in the government and in the population and media?
I think that one of the biggest one is the massive amount of money and communication put from the government side into really making Hungarians believe that everybody who comes here poses a threat to our borders, that they are all illegal people, and that they are all terrorists. And they have built it up now since almost 18 months in such a strong way. For example, just for you to understand, just now the Hungarian foreign minister has given an interview where he said that he was in Brussels, he went to a no-go zone, and he was so scared that he had to run for his life. And he ran so fast that he never thought he could run this fast. The Hungarian rhetoric of the politicians has gone to such an appalling level that it's very hard for you to fight. And also the national TV, basically all they keep saying is that illegal immigrants are so bad, they are so bad, they've done this, they are portraying, even they are lying in national media. So this is one of the context they have put in. It's unbelievable to fight. The second, as I said, we don't have access to national media. We only have access to few media, and they are mostly considered as opponents, opposition media, and so we are considered opposition media. And the third challenge is that this government over the past 5 years has been really trying to assume its own power and maintain its own power by really constantly finding scapegoats and different groups that have been attacked. And once it was also us, the civil organizations, who were under fire for 2 years, basically. And the point of that was that they were really trying to discredit us, and there was quite a campaign against us. And many people say that the reason is because there's no real political opposition currently in Hungary, and the civil organizations are critical enough that it's them who should be shut up. It's not the same situation yet as in Russia. So it's not that I'm afraid or that we are afraid, but it's a very sad thing to know that you, as the director of Amnesty International Hungary, are regarded as a paid political activist, as an opposition, and as an enemy to the Hungarian people. So I think this is maybe the three big challenges.
Yeah, huge challenges. Okay. So with little access or influence to the government and media, what have you chosen to focus on with your campaign then?
This March we started our own campaign, Life Without Borders, give refugees a chance, and we were trying to fight this massively spreading xenophobia. Our aim is to achieve that Hungary is a more tolerant and more open society, and that people have an increased solidarity towards refugees. We knew that this campaign doesn't stand too much of a chance, but the results are just really sad. One of the major parts of our campaign is that we wanted to collect 20,000 people out of the 10 million in Hungary who are supportive towards the basic rights that somebody fleeing war and persecution should receive. We have basically created what is it called, a declaration, which really doesn't have anything complicated. And we wanted 20,000 people to join. We launched the campaign at the beginning of March, and so far we have 1,175 people who joined. We are trying massively, really, we are with our little pins trying to fight against this government terror, and it's very hard. We are not giving up on that, because we feel that in this situation, even though this is it's a campaign not possible to win, we do think that organizations like Amnesty have to stand there. And regardless of our unsuccess, we have to keep messaging that refugees are human beings and they deserve basic rights, and we have to provide them these basic rights. And then a second thing, something that actually works a bit better, is that we expanded massively our human rights education program, and we developed a lesson plan on what if you were a refugee one day. And with some crowdfunding and with some grants, we actually, so far, we reached 2,800 kids, and these lessons are working really well. So what we felt is that with the current situation, we can't really change things, but we hope to build a future rights-respecting generation.
Okay, fabulous. And what are the key channels you're trying to reach new people through? And
compared to our previous campaigning experience with topics like, death penalty, on which probably everybody has an opinion, with death penalty, for example, you could really make people think about their opinion. But when it comes to the refugees, first of all, as I said, this word hardly even is mentioned in Hungary. It's all about illegal immigrants, although there is a huge difference. First of all, no person should be illegal, because it should be called irregular immigrants. But anyways, already these people have even those people who have been having a healthy thinking, or people who were maybe not necessarily full fighters of human rights, but they were normal people earlier, they would totally give a chance to those people who are in big need of help. But now, basically, I really think that it's a webinar, so I think I can say that it seems as if people have been brainwashed, and when you try to reach out to them, already they have such a strong opinion that you cannot change, because it's all built on fear. The government has basically brainwashed you, saying that all these people who come, in Syria, who can deny what's happening in Syria? What is happening now in Aleppo? Nobody can deny it. Still, this government managed to convince almost everybody. And when I say almost everybody, a recent survey just came out in April, which basically said that only 1% of the Hungarian population is willing to help the refugees. Only 1%. The remaining 1990 is either fully against refugees or definitely not positive. I think 1% is just unbelievably shocking. And Hungary has been strong on being xenophobic, but not this much. And so it's very hard. And I just came back from a music festival where we were there with our campaign, trying to do all sweet things and blah blah. We were trying on the very soft level, and usually I have no problems collecting signatures or going up to people, but now I did always have to take a deep breath before somebody came, and I'm like, hi, this is Amnesty, are you pro or against refugees? I was trying to be funny, and they're like, oh, then I'm like, I don't even start. So it's very hard. You already have this, you have this, basically people are being filtered through this now in the society, and you hardly find anybody to whom, if you mention this name, this word refugees, they would be open, and they would think as normal people.
Okay, so between now and the referendum, sort of besides the 20,000 sort of signatures on the declaration, what else are you trying to achieve between now and then?
We are monitoring the Hungarian legislation, but because we do not have access to the Hungarian government, clearly we can't really, every time we make our observations, we make our recommendations, the government is just not regarding us as a partner. They are normally denying our findings. So although we are doing all the monitoring and legislative work, we don't have a partner. That's something normally Amnesty is very strong at. Secondly, we are trying to mobilize the society, but it's just way too strong. So basically, we feel that whatever is left is that we will try to provide such information and such thought-provoking programs, events, that we hope that maybe will a little bit make people think before they go into the voting booth. Of course, this is again a political referendum, and of course, Amnesty is never calling for a boycott. So although a lot of people are expecting us to kind of give a direction of how we want people to behave at the referendum, that's not something we are going to do. Everybody is free to decide what they want, and we do not want to direct people to do this or that, but we will try everything we can to through our media work, that's not that bad, through our social, through Facebook, and also we try to develop a series of programs in our campaign, like using new tools. We have 2 theater plays. They are improv shows. One of them is about a refugee who is being hosted by a family. The other one is a forum theater, where we are trying to involve the spectators. I don't know if you're familiar with this technique, but it was developed by Augusto Boar in Brazil. And basically it requires the spectators, who he calls spect actors, to act and change the course of the play. So with that, we are also trying to teach people that, we know that it's a very hostile environment, but if you think the right way, then we do need you to duplicate or triplicate your presence and your support, because these people need it. We have also used slam poetry to ask slam poets to write about refugees, to write about how it must be when you have to leave your life behind and start a new one. And so we are trying a variety of non-typical campaigning tools to just somehow get to people's minds and just wake their human side up. But it's very hard when the government keeps pushing that you have to be bad and you have to be afraid.
Yeah, it sounds really interesting, some of the things you're trying. Yeah. So for after the referendum, are your plans to continue this work after the referendum as well? And, have you set a time that this has to be for a year or 2 years, or you'll just see how it goes?
That's our local campaign towards the Hungarian reality. Yeah. But in September at the UN, there is the big refugees summit, and in September Amnesty is launching our global campaign on refugees. So in fact, this work will be as massive and as profound as possible in the next 2-3 years for our organization. Clearly in Hungary with much less success than we can normally achieve, and I'm sure it will be times of a lot of frustration, but that's our job, that's our dedication. So I think we should be the last persons to quit believing in advocating for the rights of these people, and we should be the last ones to stop, despite all the frustration, to keep saying that they are all humans, and we should all be treated equally.
Yeah. Okay, and a final question before I pass it over to others to ask questions as well. What would make the biggest difference in your campaign right now?
Change of government. No, it's really so frustrating. No, I'm 2 years only.
Okay.
So honestly, it's campaigning is not about giving up, or it's not about not seeing any chance for impact, but this case is really, really hard. I mean, imagine from now on for 2 months, the government will again speed up on campaigning against these people, and what they keep messaging is basically, if you are an average Hungarian person, actually it's better for you to believe that and feel safe. It's not that risky. So that's why it's also so hard to compete with this, because the government has basically brought fear to these people. And I must admit that it's so intensive that at some point, even I almost felt that it's affecting me. I mean, this is a webinar again, so maybe I'm a bit more informal, but I have no clue how horrific the Rwanda genocide could have been. But the fact that they kept saying the same message, kept saying the same message, like now they keep saying that these are all illegal immigrants, they are taking away our jobs, they are here, we need to protect the border. I think this is just causing such a social psychosis on people that it's so hard to resist, even if you are a safe person. So I've never been so pessimistic in a campaign, and it's really a pain, because that's why, when you're a campaigner, well, which I'm not, but I used to be, you are the one who is the last one to believe in achieving it, and you always see a way forward. And this one is very, very hard.
Yeah, it sounds like a difficult circumstance. I guess if as campaigners we can't be optimistic, then I guess no one can. So we've got to keep that light burning.
Yep.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to switch to Q&A mode now. For everyone out there, underneath the video should come a little hand in a second. And when you press that, something should happen on my end, which I will then give you the microphone. So if anyone wants to ask a question, press that hand, and we'll see what I can make happen. Otherwise, we'll do it via the chat window. Okay, I'm going to give someone a voice who's dialed in via phone. The first one here. Okay. Hello, you.
It's Alison Diller from. Hello.
Yes, you have the floor. Introduce yourself.
Hi. It's Alison Diller from Friends of the Earth in the UK.
Welcome.
Thank you, Orsolya, for that. I mean, it was really, really informative and completely horrifying. I wanted to ask, I suppose, again, despite what you've said, whether or not there are more positive examples of local response to refugees, be it individuals or through smaller groups. I know that Friends of the Earth Europe has been working hard at a local level to try and help improve refugee response. So I'd be interested to know if you've come across any of the Friends of the Earth activities. And also a separate question, if any of the refugees and migrants that you are working with, if they are giving environmental reasons as drivers for having to leave their homes, or whether or not you are dealing really with conflict refugees.
It's me now?
Yes, it's you again.
Yes. Thank you for your questions. To respond to the first one, I'm not aware of any Friends of the Earth activities here, but luckily there were some positive local initiatives, especially last year. You might be aware that a lot of people got stuck at the train station in Budapest, and so many Hungarian people have been mobilized, even those who you would have never thought that ever in their life they are going to volunteer. People have been paying for the food and water and everything to these refugees because the government was not providing anything. So then I think I've really never seen so many people being mobilized. Now, however, I mean, that was a hands-on experience, a hands-on opportunity for you to go there and do a good work. But since Hungary is now a refugee-free zone, you don't meet refugees, so you cannot really go and help. Though most of the place where you can find refugees now is at the Serbian-Hungarian border, at the transit zones. But just 2 days ago, the Serb authorities have prohibited people from entering there and providing food, despite the fact that there's no food, there's no proper shelter there, there's no toilets, there's no sanitation there. They banned it. So the difficult thing is then you don't really have refugees, so there are not that many initiatives. Of course, there are 3-4 local NGOs who are focusing strongly on it, and everybody has their own little circles, but you don't really have refugees here. You have former refugees who have been settled here, but very few. Last year, Hungary has given 500 refugee status, and only some 120 remained in Hungary. So people are just fleeing because there's so hostile environment here. To answer your second question, which, oh my God, now I forgot, but I remember, yes, whether we are providing, we are working with refugees. The thing is that we don't have access to refugees. Amnesty doesn't provide legal aid. So if we had legal aid, then we could have access. But the problem is that we are not even allowed to enter neither the refugee camps, neither the detention centers. In fact, this weekend, we are going on a research mission to the southern border, to Hungary and to Austria, and we are not allowed to enter to those places where, you know, we can only enter to open refugee camps, but even to the transit zones, we are not allowed to. So basically, we don't really have access to refugees. We only have access, asylum seekers. We would only have access to refugees if we are lucky to find someone, because they are not very many here in Hungary.
Okay, great, thanks. And Alison, did you have any follow-up question to that? Feel like
but it's a slightly separate question. No, I understand the situation. It's just really, what can we do to help from outside Hungary? Is what, you know, how can we support you?
Thank you. I think if you come from a country which maybe is a bit more positive towards refugees, or if you are in a country where you can achieve something on the refugee issue, I think that's very important. I don't think in the case of Hungary anything will change in the next few years, but I think it's very important how Europe will respond to refugees, or how Europe will continue to respond to refugees, and then of course eventually the whole world. But from the Hungarian perspective, I think it's very, very important that in this region, at least, this very basic principle is upheld. So I think whenever you campaigners are in a position to talk about the refugee issue, or to campaign on their rights, I think it's really, really important, because we cannot just sit back and let basically Europe fall to pieces when it comes to solidarity.
Great, thank you.
And then,
Okay.
sorry, and then of course also raising awareness about the Hungarian situation and how wild a democratic EU member government can go from a normal one. I think that's also important.
Yeah. Fantastic. There's no more questions queued up, but since I asked for people to provide questions when they registered, I have a few that people have asked. So one of them was, what challenges have you faced, if any, contacting the Hungarian government about such opposing views? You
No
touched on it.
challenge, you know, they just simply don't answer, and that's it.
Right. Okay. So it's complete sort of a wall to any
Yeah,
conversation.
interesting. You know, sometimes when I send an email as the director of all the members of the parliament, interestingly, even Jobbik, which is the far right, even they respond, you know, Miss Director, thank you very much. You know, they are not agreeing with us, but at least they say a thank you. The government never, never.
And are there any opposition members who sort of are more sympathetic to what you're asking?
Yes, actually, lately there started to be, there's only, I think, 6 opposition parties in Hungary, out of which 5 are from the, wait, 5 who are from center or rather left, and at least 2 have reached out to us, and we have explained to them the issue, we have explained to them the situation, also because, you know, 2 years ago Hungarians did not even know the difference between a refugee and a migrant, let's say, like they did not necessarily know what a refugee was, and they did not necessarily know what an economic migrant was, or I don't know how to differentiate it. So we did explain to them the situation. In many cases, we've seen how they have adopted what we think, but the opposition is really not taken seriously, and they are very, very weak. So yeah, that can be seen as a positive thing, that we did influence the opposition.
Okay. And then another question around, how are you communicating your updates to your supporters, and how frequently?
That's also a tricky one. I mean, we are a very small office. We are 6 people. We've never been this big. So we are this small office. And we have a fundraiser, we have a campaigner, we have a person responsible for advocacy media, a human rights education person, the office manager, and me. And what we try to do lately is that we, through our advocacy person, whenever we write emails, we try to, I mean, we communicate mostly through emails and through telemarketing, but when it comes to this issue, it's mostly through our database. And we do try to write longer article like emails now explaining what it is exactly, because a lot of people have no chance to really learn about the background of what is this relocation quota, what is this referendum. So that was something that really worked well. I don't know the rest of the word, but lately in Hungary, journalism is very tabloid-like. They really give titles to the articles that you really want to read, but I think it's everywhere. So we also try to a little bit adapt this, but inside we are very, very simply and easily explaining, why is this a problem? Why should I care? So it's more like we started communicating more in a Q&A style. We also try to provide on our Facebook. Twitter doesn't work in Hungary, so Facebook is the only one. We do try to show different perspectives. We've just issued a press release on how Aleppo people are being held as hostages, and then we are showing a different dimension of how, you know, you've been a refugee. I mean, you've been applying for your status for years now, and your kid is not going to school. So we do try a lot of segments, but technically it's through emails mostly, and through all these events that I try to tell you about, that we try to give a bit of a lighter opportunity for people to join.
Okay. Now, Libby from CAFOD, CAFOD is a Catholic community in England and Wales, has a question. She said her mic isn't working, but she wanted to ask if there's any faith groups that are active in campaigning and supporting refugees, and would Amnesty Hungary consider working with in coalition with them? She says, we at CAFOD are currently running a solidarity campaign for refugees to raise awareness, and that's proven popular with our supporters in the Catholic community.
Yeah, you're doing a great job. You know, I was brought up as a Catholic myself, by the way, and I remember that religion teaching us how you have to take care of the others who are in need. And interestingly, the Hungarian government is a Christian Democrat, and like the church, few months ago, when somebody asked the church, why isn't the church helping the refugees? They said because it would be considered as human trafficking, which is sanctioned. So very, very sadly, no big church is not even speaking up for refugees, which I really find a shame. Hungary is about 50% Catholic, 50%, not 50, but half Protestant. So even I think religiously we are relatively diverse, and these religions here basically have the same message when it comes to, you know, your other people in need of help. And surprisingly, no church. What's more, the church often is speaking the messages of the government during masses. But there is some, like well, not the same, but there is a charity. Two charities are allowed to help the refugees, and one of them I think is somewhat Catholic, but they are more of a charity. So unfortunately, even on that dimension, I think it's very sad.
Okay. And you know, do you have a sort of a Caritas or other sort of type of development Christian organizations there in Hungary?
Yeah, that's what I talk about is called Oltalom. It's not Caritas, but I think it's similar to them.
Okay.
But even they have been banned now from distributing food in the past 2 days.
Food.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, yes.
Ouch. And the Red Cross?
It can change anything. Red Cross, interestingly, this is just my personal view. It's not that we have a research on how much the Red Cross has done, but the Red Cross, the Maltese charity, and this Oltalom that would a little bit correspond to Caritas, they were the three ones who were allowed to provide humanitarian aid to the refugees other than the UNHCR. And interestingly, when we were doing food distribution, I mean on a private level, to all the trains that were coming through, Red Cross would be always wearing masks, and there were only a few people, and it was very, very strange. Like, you didn't necessarily see them dying to go and help these people, but more like, oh, okay, we have to do this. And that was also rather disappointing. This is not what impression you have from the Red Cross. But again, this is a low-level insight from what we have seen.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So Libby says, wow, that's shameful and disappointing. Thank you for your answer. That's what she said.
I think it is. I mean, a lot of people were shocked that, you know, at least from churches, you would expect, at least on an oral level, to speak up for these people. And no.
Do you think organizations like CAFOD and others from outside could apply moral pressure, sort of Christian to Christian on them?
I think that, I mean, honestly, in Christianity, it's even said you have to do this.
Yeah.
Including that you shouldn't be lying like the government does. I think it would be something interesting when previously, Alison, you asked if what you could do from outside. I mean, despite the fact that, you know, we're a secular organization, I think that could be something good among churches to a little bit put pressure on at least churches should be more vocational.
Yeah.
I think that, or vocational? No, like more vocal, sorry.
More vocal, yes. Okay. So the next question I have then is sort of, isn't life without borders too radical for most people? Are you trying to mobilize a small group or to pioneer this conversation?
You think it's radical? Can I ask back, or why would you think?
Well, I guess the person who was asking this question, I don't necessarily know who asked this question. I didn't record it here, but you know, perhaps the name, I guess, at least is translated in English, Life Without Borders. So I guess may sound a bit sort of radical.
Limitless?
Yeah.
No, I'm just asking, just for curiosity, in Hungarian, Life Without Borders would have a double meaning. One is referring to people who had to leave borders, like life without border, like physical limit, like a border. But the second would also mean that you should step over your own limitations. Limitation and border in Hungarian is the same. So it's a little bit of people of like, come on, just pass beyond your own limitations and do give refugees a chance. So I think in Hungarian it works a bit better. Given our, I don't know if you can see our logo. I don't know if I've sent it, but the logo of the campaign is basically a little heart where somebody is stepping through. You know, instead, so it's as if it was a border, but so we actually did try to use very, very sweet and cute things because we wanted to keep it at a very, very superficial level in a way, because we know that it's a very strong issue in such a situation, and so we really, all we want people is to just for a second, just think, because once you think about it, then you shouldn't be able to close back your heart again. So I do hope it's not very radical. I mean, radicalism is anyways far from Amnesty. I think on a local level, it's very, like, as I said, you know, slam poetry, and then writers are writing novels. So for me, it's more like really waking up the human side of you. So I really hope it's not radical. But in October, if you come to the forum, then maybe you could have a chance to discuss it more in the detail.
Yeah, no, I think actually you've explained it well, because in English it could have a double meaning as well. Although in the context of migration, borders in English immediately brings up one particular interpretation. But I can see how now it could be,
which would be like, let people flawlessly arrive to Europe type of thing. Mm-hmm. Yes, probably.
But yes, no, I understand sort of now a bit more that borders could mean personal borders, thought borders, things like that. Okay. So
you can also use it as personal border, right? Just because in the future, then I should pay attention to explaining maybe first the translation issue.
Yes, you could use it in terms of your own barriers, and perhaps maybe barriers
maybe. So it should be like without.
You know, it's but again, this is getting into wordsmithing.
Yes.
But
no, but I.
And that was a question from Joy. She just claimed it on the chat there, sort of about my position. Yes. Yeah, and she says, is it Joy? Yeah, sound like it's like the meaning in Hungarian is more complex. So
yes.
Yeah, that's good to hear.
As the name of a good campaign always is, no?
Absolutely, absolutely. There was another question then that came up beforehand about how do you explain to members such a complex issue?
Yes, membership in Hungary is not very active. If we talk about extended membership, like those around at our Facebook page or those around Amnesty, then luckily only those are around who know this basic thing, and so you don't necessarily need to explain, because as I said, this issue is so contaminated in Hungary that there's no chance you have here someone who is maybe undecided. We do have trainings for our members with the help of our advocacy officer. We are also trying to, whenever we communicate with them in written, we do always try to hide a bit of an explanatory part or note in Hungary. Normally I mean, we know that migration includes refugees and non-refugee migrants, let's say it that way. And in Hungarian, we would have two separate words for it. And migrant would be the joint name for it. But the government, for example, started using migráns constantly, which is a very rough Latin word that normally you would never use in Hungarian. And so because of this, you can see how people are being confused whether they should be called migrants or refugees. And so although the bad thing is that every refugee is a migrant, but not every migrant is a refugee. So verbally, it's not so bad, but because you know the intention behind, so we are, we feel very, very important. So we do try to reinforce the use of refugees, asylum seekers, and migrants. And we do try to a little bit distinguish the two, because on one side, you know, a state has all the right to tell an economic migrant to go home, but you cannot say this to somebody who is fearing persecution, for example. So we try to clarify it a bit. Every time we have an outreach event, then we prepare the activists again. And for our human rights trainers, we just had a last night when we kind of refresh their knowledge, because with all the legal changes, situations change. So but because we are small, you know, it's easy to hold the training for all the, I don't know, 8 active activists. So we try our best.
Right. And is the slam poetry and other sort of outreach activities, is that attracting more people to be interested in Amnesty, or?
It helps us attracting people who are completely new. Because I don't know how it is abroad, but slam poetry in Hungary for the past 6-7 years is a very, very big underground thing. I think it's a little bit the same as the underground rock bands were of the 80s here. And so because slam poetry here is pretty political, but it's always very correct political and very much human rights respecting, just a lot of people love it. And then when you invite these slam poets to write on specific issues like life without barriers or borders, then it's I think it provides a different tool that we can use to open up somebody's something. Then with the theater play, with the forum theater, people really, really enjoy it. And we don't think that we can change somebody's mind who is now an anti-refugee person into a refugee person, but we hope that whoever are thinking alike, we can strengthen them and we can appreciate them, and we are trying to value them and tell this to them so that maybe, you know, they become a stronger agent of those very few who are acting. And the second is that we also kind of thought that, and this is a shift we have made in our campaign, that instead of trying to preach to the unpreached, we feel that we are more strengthening the already preached, because we do need this little core amount of people at least. So they also help I mean, these creative programs also help to value the ones who are already around.
Okay, fantastic. Well, there's no other questions that have come up, and I think the questions people have asked, you've answered them. The ones anyway. I guess some final bits. Is there anything else that you want to share with people here today, or ask, or etc.?
Maybe just a final thought. And while I was kind of preparing my thoughts for this afternoon, I at some point I was like, why am I speaking about this campaign when it's just failing, when we have no chance of achieving anything whatsoever, and we just keep frustrating ourselves. But then I realized, you know, you can't always have fantastic campaigning stories, because from fantastic campaigning stories you can always learn the same thing, but from catastrophic campaigning stories you can learn different things. And maybe I was also thinking that maybe it can help for some of you value when you can actually have an impact with your campaigning, and maybe it can motivate you that whenever you have progress, then you should value it much more, because campaigning is not just, and I'm sure you know, it's not just you come up with something and then you deliver it. Sometimes you can't, or sometimes it's very hard. So I think campaigning is the most amazing thing in the world. I wish I could go back as a campaigner one day. And I think it's a very, very good thing to do, even if you are going through such a times of frustration like us.
Yeah, no, you know, I absolutely agree. I think that sort of, in a sense, the hopeless causes are just as valuable as the easy wins, because it's often the hopeless causes that help set us up for easy wins, perhaps years or decades down the road. So, you know, so I appreciate that.
No decades, please.
Exactly. But another thing that I want to say then is sort of, I think some people here were interested in finding out ways they could help, and there's been some ideas that came up here. So I sort of, if you do want to be put directly in touch, sort of for those of you who are watching right now, sort of, Orshi, can I give out your email address and things?
Please,
for people?
Yes, definitely.
Okay, great. And that way you can be in touch and see how you can help, because I think that within this community, sort of, there are lots of people who can help in different ways, etc. So you know, great. It's especially given there's a small team of 6 there. You know, it's I think in Hungary you're really on the sharp end of dealing with some of the ways government can be horrible around this issue, and it's shocking that this can still occur in Europe in this day and age. So. Yeah.
Thank you so much, and looking forward to maybe hearing some good ideas.
Absolutely.
I hope to see many of you in Berlin.
Yes, and so that's the final thing. I guess we get to hear part 2 of this story in Berlin, October sort of 5th to 7th. So would love to see many of you there, and sort of. But if not, we will try and also capture some of the learning out of that experience as well, and share it. And if you do need anything or have other ideas, do reach out. And I think there is a group of people sort of here who are willing to interested, willing to help. So don't be afraid of asking. And I've got a few things here from Elizabeth saying, keep up the fight. Thank you so much, Orshi. From Karina in Switzerland, thank you for sharing your experience. From Denise, thank you very much. So some chat comments coming across. And thank you for your time, because I realize you've got a lot to do with a small office there, and you've just taken not only an hour out for this, but you've actually taken the time we talked earlier in the week. You've taken arriving early and dealing with all the technical issues, having to prop up your phone against a coffee a coffee pot.
I need to show this to you.
Exactly.
This is where my phone stands.
Propped against a coffee pot to make this happen. So really, really appreciate that time you've taken, because you know, I find it, you know, phenomenally inspiring to what you're having to deal with, and that you're able to still go through it positively. So thank you for that.
Thank you. Thank you.
Okay, we'll talk to you soon. Goodbye, everyone,
Bye.
and goodbye, Orshi.